lawyers don't have a really good reputation, do they? In one of my congregations, my organist was also a lawyer, so I used to give him a lot of grief about being a lawyer. And I had a lot of lawyer jokes. I'm not going to share those tonight, but they're often the butt of a lot of jokes, aren't they? But their reputation's also pretty poor. Sometimes they're like ambulance chasers, they're sleazy, they're bloodsuckers, they're scumballs. Just to name a few adjectives I've applied to lawyers. It seems like the profession hasn't changed in 2,000 years, because I don't think the lawyer in the story comes off very well either. This guy knows the law. And at first it seems like he tries to catch Jesus up in the law, and then when he doesn't catch him up in the law, he seems to try to use the legal system to his own advantage. He asks Jesus, "Who is my neighbor?" And in response, Jesus tells probably one of the best known stories of the Bible. It's kind of one of the stories we all learn when we were in Sunday school. Noah's Ark, the Good Samaritan, maybe the only stories some adults remember. And our legal system actually acknowledges its presence, because we have Good Samaritan laws in most states that state if a person stops to try to help somebody, if they've been injured in an accident or whatever, that they can't be sued because they're doing their best to help somebody. So, I know some of you are probably saying, okay, we've heard dozens of sermons on the Good Samaritan. Why do we have to have one more? Well, it's our lesson for today. But today I kind of want to look at the lawyer in this story, because he's the one asking questions. And I don't think his questions are a whole lot different from the questions we ask today. First, he wants to know, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Isn't that what some people ask today? What must I do to be saved? There's got to be something that I do. And the lawyer knows the answer. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul. We would say, love God with mind, body, and soul, and your neighbor as yourself. With our whole being, we should love God, completely commit ourselves to God. And because we love God in that way, we love ourselves and we love our neighbor. The lawyer knows the right answer. All he has to do is do it. Simple, right? But no, he has to try to complicate things. Who is my neighbor? He tries to kind of weasel out of that second part. Who am I supposed to love? And he can be forgiven for asking this question. In his time, there were laws that governed the behavior. One set of laws dealt with those who were like you, another how you interacted with strangers. So the lawyer kind of wants to split those hairs and have Jesus tell him exactly what it is he's supposed to do. Who can he safely care for? Who can he safely ignore? In other words, he wants to know who deserves to be recognized as a fellow human being and who is beneath my notice. And you know what? We ask the same question, maybe in a different way today. We ask, to whom am I supposed to show compassion? Who should I care for? And who could I ignore? Should I care for the homeless family that's down the street? They're homeless because they've been laid off because of cutbacks. Maybe I should help them, provide them with food or shelter, help them get back on their feet. But I could ignore the person who is on the street because they've been doing drugs, right? After all, it's his own fault that he's on the street. He doesn't deserve my care. Who is my neighbor? We try to put limits on compassion and caring. And the problem is when we start doing that, when we try to define who it is that deserves our help and who doesn't, we can make tragically wrong choices. whenever I read this passage, I think about an incident that happened in my teen years that always makes me reflect again on the lawyer's question. When I was about 10 or 12, my grandfather decided he was going to come and visit us. I'm not sure why he came alone, but the plan was for him to come and visit with us for a week. And we were all excited because my grandfather didn't drive. So he was going to take the bus from Harrisburg, PA, where he lived, to Newark, New Jersey, where my dad was working. My dad was in the military. He was with the Civil Air Patrol in Newark. And the plan was for my grandfather to get the bus in the morning, take it to Newark, and then he would call my father at his job when he got in, and my dad would come pick him up and drive him to our house. Well, time came that my dad expected the phone call from my grandfather, and no call. About 4:30 in the afternoon. 6 o'clock came, and there still was no call. And obviously, this is before cell phones. My dad got worried, called home, asked my mom what was going on. My mom, in the meantime, called my grandmother and determined that, yes, my grandfather had left this morning. He should have been in at Newark at 4:30 p.m. My dad called again. No sign of him anywhere at the station. Finally, about 7 o'clock, my mom got a phone call from a stranger. Did we know a William Flowers? Yes. Where is he, she asked. He was across the street from the terminal in a coffee shop. When my dad called again, my mom said, go across the street, pick him up, bring him home. You see, my grandfather was a diabetic. And in his excitement of leaving and coming to see us, he had forgotten to take his insulin in that morning. He started to feel ill on the trip, and by the time he got to Newark, he was slurring his speech, and he was staggering around when he tried to walk. He couldn't remember my dad's number. He had tried to ask people for help, and most people thought he was drunk and ignored him. But one kind soul, one good Samaritan took pity on him, helped him find my mother's number, and stayed with him until my dad could pick him up. When we see and hear the news and the awful things that we can do to one another, man's inhumanity to man, I'm often asked, well, what can one person do? The answer is plenty. React to each human being as if they were deserving of all the care and compassion you have. Then you won't treat someone who is sick as if they were drunk. Then you will come to the aid of someone who's being attacked. Then you will make a difference in the world. I thought about this again when I was reading about people in this administration joking about feeding human beings to alligators. When is it ever acceptable to joke about killing another human being? We can speak up and out. This story is here to remind us that every single human being on this earth is our neighbor and deserves our care. Frederick Buechner defines it this way: compassion is the sometimes fatal capacity for feeling what it's like to live inside someone else's skin. It is the knowledge that there can never really be peace and joy for me